Alright, so this week's big game is of course Silent Hill F. This is the first Silent Hill game we've had in a long time, many years in fact, and I've already heard people say this is the best Silent Hill game ever, that it's a 10 out of 10, and I've also heard people say that this game is rubbish, they don't like it, and it's not worth the price. Now, after playing the game through 3 full times, getting 3 different endings, seeing pretty much all of the content in the game, playing it through on hard action difficulty and story mode action difficulty, and I'll tell you which one I prefer out of those two. But after doing all of that and seeing pretty much all of the content aside from 2 more endings, I feel pretty confident in my opinion now. So what do I think? Do I think this is the best Silent Hill game ever made, or do I think it's trash? Honestly, I think the truth is somewhere in between. I don't think this is the best Silent Hill game, far from it, but I don't think this game is trash. Now this is just going to be like a little mini review, but I want to start it by saying this very clearly. I really like this game. As a game, as a horror game, I think Silent Hill F is phenomenal. Phenomenal maybe is a bit of a stretch. I think it's very good. I think it's a fun game. I think it's got a lot of good things to it, and I overall, in my 3 playthroughs, really enjoyed my time with the game. But as a Silent Hill game, I was left a little bit underwhelmed and a little bit disappointed. Now you might be thinking, hang on a minute, if you said the game is really good, how could you be disappointed? Well, that's quite simply because this is a Silent Hill game. If this was a standalone game, just a horror game in general, I would be singing this game's praises and saying it's really good. But compare it to Silent Hill 1 to 4, and I do think this game is very lacking in some really key areas. So I want to get my thoughts out. I'm going to give you like a little mini review. I'm not going to do any spoilers until the second half of the video, so I'll let you know when we've moved over into the spoiler section. So don't worry, if you haven't played the game yet, I'm going to do a spoiler-free review, and then we'll get on to the really juicy stuff. But yeah, let's get into things that I like about Silent Hill F. So the first thing you'll probably notice with Silent Hill F are the graphics, and I think the graphics in this game are pretty great. I mean, graphics are probably my least important thing in any game if I'm being entirely honest, but I do appreciate them when they are good, and in Silent Hill F, they are really good. This game is beautiful, and certain moments of this game are already pretty iconic. This shot, for an example, is being shown everywhere, and I think there's a reason for that. Not only is this shot just really good, and it's a really memorable part of the story, but it's also just very aesthetically pleasing. Like this shot is complete thumbnail bait. I probably used it in my thumbnail, let's be honest, but the overall graphics and the design of the game is really pretty. And pretty might seem weird because Silent Hill is usually supposed to be dark and gritty and disgusting, and there is that in this game, absolutely, but it's also contrasted with a lot of beauty. And I think especially with this being a Japanese game, and we'll come onto the culture in a little bit, but with this being a Japanese game, that just seems very appropriate to me. The idea of beauty and disgust being so perfectly contrasted like this is just great. And I love it. I love the spider lily imagery. I love all of this. It's great in terms of its graphics and aesthetics. And that carries over to the design of the enemies as well. The Ayakakashi, the scarecrows, are immediately iconic. I think these are just as iconic now already as the nurses from Silent Hill. And I think there's a reason why people are doing cosplays, people have seen statues of these things. There's a reason for that, because these are really well designed. They're creepy, they're animated really well. All of the enemies in the game are animated really well, superbly. And they, particularly these enemies, they are very immediately recognizable and iconic. So I like that a lot. Something else that I really like about this game is the overall culture of it. Now, this is the first Silent Hill game to be set in Japan. All of the Silent Hill games have been made by Japanese studios, but they've all been set in America, where this is the first one to be set in Japan. It's set in 1960s Japan, which is a big key part of the story, but we'll get onto that later. And I really like it. I really like the culture of the game. There's a lot of, I would say, modern for the time, culture elements. No spoilers, but for an example, there's a lot of people in the game who rely on traditional herbal medicine and they don't trust pharmaceuticals, but there's other people that only rely on pharmaceuticals and think that old traditional herbal medicine is you know, snake oil, or it's terrible, it's a con. And so just seeing little notes of people with their differing attitudes between things like that and things like religion. There's a lot of religion in this game, or there's conflicts of religion. There's different gods that it's talked about. There's one very particular, very important to the story god in Inari, and that's the god of, I believe, harvests, maybe something like that. Listen, when I do my things you might have missed video, I'll probably get into the culture of it. But he often blesses you, but he might also trick you or demand a price. There's a lot of themes like that I really enjoyed. There's a lot of culture in terms of what people look to in terms of their religion or worship or how they view the world. And I like a lot of that. A lot of that is really fascinating, really interesting to delve into the notes of this game and the background lore. Not once did I feel like the notes were boring or that they were not worth picking up and reading. Every single one gave me something, whether it was a little bit of the horror or whether it was a little bit of the background lore and culture. All fantastic, loved it. That brings me on to the things that I find a little bit more mixed. Now, these are not things that are necessarily bad, but these are things that aren't necessarily perfect or have flaws or things that I just was a little bit mixed feelings on. And the first and most obvious one is the combat. Oh boy, I could probably make a whole video about the combat in this game because the combat, and I can't believe I'm saying this, the combat is essentially Dark Souls combat. Now, I know someone's going to get mad in the comments when I say this, but essentially it is. If you've ever played a Dark Souls game, you will immediately find this combat familiar. In any of the Souls games, or Souls-likes, whatever, FromSoft-likes, whatever you want to call them, you are going to be doing the fundamental same thing. You are going to be managing your stamina, you are going to be timing your attacks appropriately, you are going to be dodging and parrying, and that is true for every single Dark Souls game. And that's also true for this game. Now, combat, we'll get into in the spoiler section. Combat does sort of change towards the second half of the game and it gets a bit more complicated. And there are some different things. So let me explain how it works. In Silent Hill F, you only have melee weapons, which makes sense, but you can do a light attack. You can do a heavy attack, which heavy attack obviously is slower and it takes more of a wind up, which is more of a risk. You are going to be dodging enemies and you can essentially parry them. The parry is like a counter attack thing that you can only do while you're focusing, and you can also do a power attack while you're focusing too. But again, all of these things leave you open to a potential enemy attack. Now, in a lot of ways, I enjoyed this combat. It feels weighty and heavy and every, attack counts, or it has to count, particularly if you're playing on hard mode. And I like the idea of you really having to think about how you approach combat. But at the same time, combat in this game is very clunky and it's very reliant on a very awful camera. Now, things like this all get worse on hard mode, and again, we'll come on to the hard versus the story mode in a minute. But there are a lot of times when, for example, you'll swing and you'll hit a wall because the environments are so small and cramped. And a lot of this reminds me of old Silent Hill games. But what a lot of people aren't seeming to get, especially on Twitter, is those games you were supposed to run away from the enemies a lot. And I've heard this be said a lot to people who are complaining about the combat, saying that you're supposed to run away. And that's true for the first 20 minutes of the game, but for the rest of the game, not only are you encouraged to fight, in a lot of cases, you are forced to fight. So when people are complaining about the combat in this game, just remember that for the majority of the game, there's a lot of combat that you are forced to do. When I say forced, I mean there are doors that will not open until you've killed the enemies. There are walls of flesh or flowers or whatever, bit of both, that will not disappear until you've killed the enemies. There are boss fights, which are obviously non-optional. And there's just a lot of times where if you don't kill the enemies, you will find yourself surrounded quicker than you expect. And so often it is actually better to kill the enemies. So even when you're not being forced to kill the enemies, you are heavily encouraged to kill the enemies. But again, particularly on hard mode. Now, hard mode is another negative, in my opinion, to this game, especially on your first playthrough, because when you load up the game, there is story mode or hard mode. And there is, I think, a Lost in the Fog mode as well, which I think you get on New Game Plus. I don't think it's available at the beginning, but like a lot of Silent Hill games, you have action difficulty and puzzle difficulty, and I really appreciate that you can turn them both up or down however you like. So if you really want puzzles but you don't like the combat, you can turn the combat down, or if you're really not into puzzles, you can turn the puzzles down and turn the combat up. I love that. I love that you can sort of tailor the game to how you want. However, when you boot up the game, being shown story mode and hard mode is weird. And the reason why it's weird is because I'm somebody who generally doesn't play games on story mode. Now, if you are, that's great. That's totally fine. But I personally like a bit of challenge in my games. So if I'm shown story mode, that to me is essentially a nicer way of saying easy mode. And I don't want to play a horror game like this on easy mode. So I chose hard mode for my first run. And oh boy, that was a mistake, because the game expects you to play it multiple times, right? You expected to play this game on New Game Plus, and in fact, I think the game should tell you that, because New Game Plus is essentially the actual game, and your first run is the prologue. It's weird, but I'll explain it. And so, you really shouldn't play this game on hard mode on your first one, because you don't have any of the upgrades. You have very limited stamina. And in hard mode, enemies can kill you in like 2 hits. Like one mistake, you can die in hard mode. And on top of that, in hard mode, enemies are so tanky. They take so many hits to kill that you are going to get into situations where I find it a complete slog. But on your second run on New Game Plus, not only are you likely to have more stamina, you're going to have more of the omomoris, which are your kind of perks, I guess, trinkets, charms, whatever you want to call them. But you're also going to know what you're doing, and you're going to know where the enemies are. So on your second run, hard mode might be a bit easier. And what I did was on my second run, because I was only really playing again to get the different endings, I turned the combat down from hard to story mode, and suddenly the game was super easy. Like the combat was, it was a cakewalk. It was too easy, in my opinion. So I do think that the combat on hard, it's too much. It's a massive slog, particularly the bosses. Oh boy, the bosses take so long on hard mode. They are such a slog to get through, because again, one mistake and you can often end up dying. And so you're going to be doing it again and again and again and again, and they just take so long to die. But then on story mode, you turn your brain off and just spam attacks till they die. It's kind of weird how that there needs to be a normal mode, in my opinion. There needs to be something to bridge that gap. But that's how I feel about combat. It is absolutely Souls combat, but clunkier. The stamina regen on hard is actually more harsh than Dark Souls games, which is wild to me. But yeah, I can understand why a lot of people aren't going to like this combat. When it's a 1v1 fight, it's actually pretty fine. But when there's more than one enemy, which happens a lot, it suddenly becomes something that you don't really want to engage with it a lot of the time. And that kind of leads me on to my second thing that I'm mixed about, and that is the action horror element of this game. Now, this game is not a survival horror game, and I know I'm going to get someone else mad when I say this, but it's not a survival horror game. In the same way that Resident Evil 7 and 8 aren't really survival horror games either, this is an action horror game with survival horror elements. And if you look back at the old Silent Hill games, 1 to 4, and the old Resident Evil games, they were survival horror games with a little bit of action. This is very different. This is absolutely an action game with survival horror elements. And I'll give you a perfect example. In this game, you have weapon durability, and I'm going to come on to that later because I hate this mechanic, but you have weapon durability, and it is entirely possible in the middle of a fight, your weapon can break, and you can potentially run out of melee weapons, meaning that you can't fight, right? No. This game will spawn in weapons if you run out of weapons. If you run out of a weapon, the game will spawn in more around the environment. Yes, you might have to have a quick look around to find one, but the game will never let you actually run out of weapons. And this is so indicative of the action horror side of things. This is exactly the same with Resident Evil. In modern Resident Evil games, as soon as you start to get low on ammo, enemies that you kill will start to drop more ammo. So this isn't like the old games where you really had to think about, like, should I pick up this item? Should I save it? Should I use it? Like, should I conserve my ammunition? You don't have to worry about that in this game. And that might be a positive for you, but for somebody who likes survival horror, it makes me ask, what's the point? What's the point on having limited items if they're going to spawn in more of them when you run out of them? What's the point in having, for example, every single boss fight? Before every single boss fight is like a plethora of items for you. So if you have played the game really badly and you have just spammed all your healing items, don't worry about it, because right before the boss, you'll get a massive restock. What is the point of having weapons that break if the game just gives you new ones? It's really wild to me that people think this is survival horror, when to me, survival horror is actually making choices. And you don't have to make choices in this game because the game will fix your choices for you. And if you don't believe me that this is an action horror game compared to a survival horror game, well, Konami said it right at the beginning. They call it an action horror game, so it's an action horror game. Now, something else that I think that is mixed for me is the story. And again, I'm going to spoil the story later, but for now, I'll just say that I find the story a really good story. I think the story is pretty good, but it's not a good Silent Hill story. And it's such a distinction. If you compare this story to Silent Hill, in some ways it feels familiar and it feels similar, but in a lot of ways it feels leagues apart, completely different. I don't know how else to describe it, but this game feels more like Onimusha or Devil May Cry than it does Silent Hill. And I like both of those series, but those series are a little bit more silly. Not silly, I don't think silly is the right word, but the only way that I can describe it, and I really don't mean this to sound offensive, but it sounds more like the plot of an anime than it does a Silent Hill game. And again, I love anime. Anime is great, but it really does have that feel of fantastical. And the game even says Spirited Away at one point, and I'm like, okay. But it does have that kind of feeling to it, whereas Silent Hill always used to have this otherworldly, dark and gritty, almost Hellraiser-like sort of story, and that's definitely missing here. And like I said, we'll get onto it a little bit more in the spoilers. But that kind of leads into the tone as well. The tone in this game is nowhere near as dark and gritty and gross as Silent Hill usually is. This tone is a lot lighter. It's a lot less scary. And I know this one's going to annoy some people as well. This game is nowhere near as scary as Silent Hill 1 to 4. I'm sorry, it's not. I know scary is subjective, okay? But I think if you were to give anybody Silent Hill 1 to 4, they would call it scary. I think a lot of people are going to say Silent Hill F isn't scary. Yes, it has some moments that are a little scary, and it has some moments that are very creepy, but nothing in the game actively really scared me. Again, some of the chase scenes are very tense, and they do try in moments, but it's missing that real oppressive tone that Silent Hill always had. Silent Hill always made you think that the town was trying to kill you just as much as the enemies were trying to kill you. It felt like an evil place, like an oppressive place that you just were desperate to leave. And Silent Hill F doesn't feel like that. Yes, it looks like that, and yes, it acts like that, but it doesn't feel like that. And I know that's such like a wishy-washy thing to say, but again, just bear with me. When we get into the spoilers, you'll understand what I'm trying to say. But without spoilers, the tone, it's way less scary, it's way less dark, it's way less gritty, and it's way less oppressive, I think is the best way to say it. Now, something else that was mixed is the performance. Now, for 99% of the game, it ran like a dream for me, and I did have some stuttering around very specific areas, particularly loading into a new area. Now, it didn't happen a lot, and it was kind of annoying when it did happen, but it wasn't like it was happening all throughout the game. But I do have a very good PC. So I do wonder if people with lower PCs might struggle with this one. The stuttering might be worse for you. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. But it performed really well for most of the time. And then it was let down in certain areas, which made me just go, ugh, you know? Okay, so those are the things that I like. And those are the things that are mixed. Let's get into the things that are bad. Ooh, the bad. So first of all, the price. This game is expensive. Sorry, I don't know if I'm getting a cold. I don't know what's happening. I think I'm getting sick from Silent Hill. But the price of this game is over $100 if you get the normal edition of the game, which I'm going to say this once again. I cannot stand early access to games. When you have to pay extra to get the game 2 days early, that is the release date and everybody else is getting it late. Now, the early access, you only get early access if you got the digital deluxe. So I got the game 2 days earlier than people who are poor. Let's just say it how it is. I got the game 2 days earlier than poor people. As if I'm rich. I'm still kind of poor. But the point is I can expense this as part of my business, right? So I can pay that extra to get the game. $107, by the way, to get the game early. And what that leads to is people who can't afford to pay for that game potentially getting spoiled. And we know this is a problem because Silent Hill, the official Silent Hill Twitter, tweeted out, please don't spoil anything after giving the game to people early. We need to stop this, okay? We need to stop giving the game early to people who pay extra for it. It's trash. It's a stupid practice, and I'm going to complain about it every single time. So that's bad. But the game is relatively expensive. It's a very expensive game for what is essentially a 10 to 15 hour game, depending on if you're on hard mode or story mode, depending on, you know, how much you go looking for all the little secrets in the lore. It's a 10 to 15 hour game, and I think that is quite expensive for something that a lot of people are probably only going to play once. Now, you should play this game more than once because New Game Plus is actually a lot better than the main game. Again, we'll get onto that later. But I think a lot of people aren't going to play it more than once. And I think that for a 10 to 15 hour experience, I think that the price is a little too inflated, because particularly considering that a lot of that time is spent during the combat, which the combat, as I said, isn't amazing. So Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little bit too expensive, but that's obviously up for debate. I just think it could have been a little bit cheaper than what it was. So, to summarize my non-spoiler review, I really like this game. I like the story, I like the enemies, I like the graphics, I like the characters, I like pretty much everything about it. However, it doesn't feel like a Silent Hill game to me in so many ways. The first 20 minutes of the game to half an hour maybe felt like a Silent Hill game, and then from there it rapidly devolved. It's not as scary, it's not as weird, and it's just not, in my opinion, as oppressive as a Silent Hill game should be. So my non-spoiler verdict for this game is, if you like action horror games, you're probably gonna like this one. And if you're looking for a traditional Silent Hill experience, you might be pretty disappointed with this one. That's my non-spoiler review. Let's get in to the spoilers, because this is where I can really tell you why there are things I don't like about it and things that I love about it. So be warned, if you haven't played the game, we're gonna go to spoilers. Spoiler warning, let's go. So, the story of this game is so different to Silent Hill. It's so leagues apart from Silent Hill. And in some ways, I might say that was a good thing. But considering it's been so long since we've had a Silent Hill game, I don't think coming out of the gate after making people wait for so long and saying, here's your Silent Hill game you've been waiting for, oh, but it's very different. I don't think that's a good idea. I think this is actually a terrible idea. And I think this is why so many people are complaining about this game and saying they don't like it, is because people are hungry for a Silent Hill game, and this isn't a Silent Hill game. I'm so sorry. In some ways it is, okay? Maybe it's unfair to say it's not a Silent Hill game, because in some ways, yes, the themes of the game do fit with Silent Hill. And yes, the idea of the story does fit with Silent Hill, but the way that it's told absolutely does not fit with Silent Hill. The gameplay for 90% of the game does not fit with Silent Hill, and the overall, just the feeling, the vibe, the atmosphere, whatever you want to call it, does not fit with Silent Hill. Let me explain. Like most Silent Hill games, this game is somebody's mental state brought to life. Let me give an example. Silent Hill 2, everything that you saw was a manifestation of James's guilt. If you haven't played Silent Hill 2, sorry, bit late now, but I'm going to spoil it. Silent Hill 2, James kills his dying wife. She's very sick, she's slowly dying, and he kills her. He murders her. And you can understand some of the reasons why he might have done it, but obviously this was a terrible thing that he did, and the town of Silent Hill is feeding on that guilt. Now, the whole Silent Hill series up until this point has all been about this cult who tried to summon a god, and it didn't quite go fully to plan. So the god didn't get fully summoned, and god is debatable because it might be a demon, it might be a god, who knows? Are they the same thing? Nobody knows. It's kind of weird. You don't really have a proper answer to it. But whatever this deity, this being is, only a tiny fraction of it managed to make it through, and now it's trapped between its own world and our world, and that tiny slither of that being is enough to completely corrupt this entire town. And anyone that visits, they get assaulted by physical manifestations of their own negative emotions. It feeds on your guilt, your fears, your paranoia, your anger, your rage, your pain, all of those things. It brings those to life and it tortures you with them. Why? The cult thinks that it's trying to punish sinners. Maybe it is. Maybe it just really hates us and wants us all to die, or maybe it doesn't even want anything. Like, you don't really truly understand it. The god in Silent Hill is this being that you can never fully understand, no matter how much you research the games, no matter how much you go digging. It's kind of beyond our comprehension. And that's why Silent Hill is so good, because all of that lore is wrapped up in this horrifically disgusting and scary and visceral, town of Silent Hill that will change depending on what kind of messed up you are. So all of that is what makes Silent Hill, in my opinion, great. But Silent Hill F is similar but not the same. In Silent Hill F, the whole story is about Hinako, who is a young teenage girl in 1960s Japan who is being forced to marry somebody. She doesn't want to marry this person, and she's being forced to grow up too fast. She's being forced to essentially kill her own childhood. That's the whole point of the story. She's killing her own childhood to do the thing that she knows she has to do, but that she doesn't want to do. And her fighting against herself, because there's two Hinekos in this game, but her fighting against herself is a representation of her killing her own childhood. It's her letting go to all the things that she loves and all the things that she wants to keep in her life, but the things that she knows she can't anymore because she has to grow up. She has to become a wife, which is not something she wants to do. She has to have children, which is something else she doesn't want to do. And she has to essentially give over her identity to a man and become that man's property. That's the whole story of this game, is her accepting or fighting against, depending on what ending you're going for, fighting against that concept. And so while Silent Hill was all about, it felt like the town hated you and wanted to kill you, this feels more like Hineko hating herself almost, or her hating the world around her, and everything that she sees is a manifestation of inside of her, which again, similar to Silent Hill 2 and all the other Silent Hills, right? It's similar because in that game too, their deepest, darkest fears and pain and guilt was brought to life too. But it's different because here it isn't this ancient being, all-powerful god that we should be scared of. Here it's just essentially Hineko's mind. Now, it is debatable whether there is a god in this game. There is, it's strongly implied that Inari, the god I mentioned earlier, is a physical being and is at play, but you could easily just say this whole game was all in Hineko's mind the whole time. It's just all her fractured psyche, partly due to the pills she's been taking, which she didn't realize was actually herbal medicine, which might be part of the problem, partly due to just her mental state, her abusive father, all of these things combining to her wanting to escape, and so her manifesting this world as an escape. That's one potential way of explaining it. The other potential way of explaining it is that this world is real and it's trying to corrupt her and tempt her into doing things like potentially massacring people. That's a whole other story. So on the one hand, it is similar, but it's not the same. Tonally, it's so different. This is one of the reasons why it's not as scary, because you know that Hineko has all of the power in this situation, whereas in Silent Hill 2, for an example, you know that the town is the one with all the power, right? You can maybe overcome it, but it's going to be difficult. Whereas this game, particularly like midway through the game, you become like the driving force. You are the one who is pushing the story forward. You are the one with all the power. So midway through the game, the Shadow Hineko, the Dark Hineko, gets given a fox arm, and this fox arm is like a superpower, right? This is like something straight out of Onimusha or Devil May Cry, and so much so that midway through the game you get given the ability to become invincible. You can build up this bar by killing enemies, and once you've killed enough of the enemies, you can literally become invincible for a good minute, right? And this, while fun, this is fun. I enjoyed this combat with this arm, is so opposite to what makes Silent Hill Silent Hill. Silent Hill, again, you avoid the combat because combat is too difficult, right? You're going to run out of ammo, you're going to run out of healing items, or you're just going to take, because the combat was always kind of trash, so you were gonna get beaten eventually, right? Whereas in this game, you don't avoid the combat because you have an unlimited arm that it can go invincible, so you're encouraged to kill the enemies. And again, the game forces you to fight these enemies in multiple times, in multiple rooms, and it becomes very quickly a game that isn't very horror focused. Now again, there are the parts around the game that are horror. There was this one room as a really good example of what made me feel disappointed by this game. There was this one room where you would go in and it's full of dolls. And the whole time I was like, oh, here we go. Dolls can be real creepy. Real creepy. They're going to move. They're going to come to life. Something's going to happen. All right, we are surrounded by creepy dolls. Are these ones going to come to life? And nope. You just turn the doll around and the doll has gross stuff on it. And you do that 3 times and that's it. Ah. Cool. The creepy doll that you could have made come to life and be really creepy. It's just got guts on it. Okay. The dolls never come to life. They never move. They never do anything. Now on New Game Plus, there is a room where the exact thing that I wanted does happen, but you don't get any of that on the first playthrough. There are little moments here or there, but there was nothing like the pants wetting parts of Silent Hill 1 to 4. And so A lot of the horror in this game, it's so toned down, it's so weak in comparison to the old games that I have to mark it down. I have to say, no, this isn't as scary as what Silent Hill should be. Now, as I said earlier, this game is pretty expensive and it's essentially a 12 to 15 hour experience until you play the game on New Game Plus. And this is one of the biggest things that I feel is another mixed thing about this game, is that New Game Plus is, I think, like required to enjoy this game to its fullest. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is that the ending you get, guaranteed, your first ending, is by far the most boring and by far the least revealing of all the endings. It kind of just implies that everything is just all in Hinako's head and that she goes on a rampage and kills people or something like that. It might not be Hinako, it could be someone else. But regardless, the first ending that you're guaranteed to get is by far the most boring, and it kind of just abruptly ends. And then you play the game through on New Game Plus, and New Game Plus offers new scares. There was a moment in New Game Plus that I was begging for in the main game, and it didn't happen with the dolls. And then so it adds more scary stuff, more like rooms to explore, a whole other side quest. You can go get a sacred sword, and it also changes a bunch of the notes. A bunch of the notes change and add more context to the story, and the story only really starts to make sense on New Game Plus. It also sort of comes together, and your second ending will be much more revealing, and particularly if you figure out the little gimmick, which the gimmick is, I'm going to spoil it for you, don't take the pills, which to be fair, the game tells you that. When you look at the view endings, it says like don't take the pills, so it kind of spoils it for you anyway. But once you get the second ending, that makes a lot more sense, and then once you get a third ending, that makes even more sense. And now I'm waiting to get the fourth ending, which I'm sure is probably just going to completely reveal the story. Now, that's great for replay value, but it does also mean that you're going to have to be going through all the same areas, and if you didn't enjoy the combat, you're not going to be enjoying it a second time around, although it will be slightly easier the second time around, so that's a plus. But you're going to have to be doing all the same areas again, all the same forced combat areas again, all the same puzzles again. Some of the puzzles change a little bit depending on what ending you're going for, which is great. And the game also, it cuts out like a whole section of the game on your New Game Plus, because it gives you like a little quick recap cutscene and goes, you've already seen this, you don't need to do all this again. And I love that. That is a great addition. That means your second run will be a little bit shorter than your first run, and just cuts out some of the unnecessary fluff, some of the real cutscene heavy stuff that you don't need to see again. Brilliant. But this does mean that to actually get the full experience, you have to play the game at least twice, which means you are going to be seeing a lot of the content twice, which again, if you loved the game the first time, great. But with how, and I didn't really mention this earlier, but with how the enemies are repeated, all of the enemies are essentially just reskins of other ones. There's only four actual enemies in the game. Let me count. There are the scarecrows, which come in different forms, but they all act exactly the same. There are the people with multiple faces that stun you or do AoE attacks. There are the big, aggressive, gropey guys. There are the ones that give birth, and then there are the big guys with the sword. And apart from bosses, that's it. There are 5 enemies in the entire game, and you're going to be fighting the same 5 enemies all game. You're going to be seeing particularly the scarecrows all the way through the game. Again, they just look slightly different, but they behave exactly the same. So there are 5 types of enemies that you are going to be facing throughout the majority of the game, aside from the boss fight. And it does get a little bit repetitive, especially, like, again, I've just done my 3rd run of the game and seeing the same enemies. It's particularly the forced parts where you have to fight them that I roll every single time now. But yeah, so the having to play through the game over and over and over again to get all the different endings and having to go through the same parts, it is getting a little bit repetitive for me now. And again, I've just done my 3rd run, so, you know, that's to be expected. But I do think it's interesting that when you consider how expensive the game is, and considering that to get real value out of that, you having to do the same content over and over and over again, I do think that's another valid criticism. I don't think this game should have been as expensive as it was, if I'm being entirely honest. And I definitely don't think they should have charged for early access either. And like I say, the story, while really interesting and I really enjoyed it, compared this story to any of the old Silent Hill stories, and it's nowhere near as dark or or, you know, as oppressive or as really as scary. Again, James's story is perfect. I think one of the reasons why people love Silent Hill 2 the most is because of that story. Knowing that James murdered his wife because he couldn't cope anymore is a really horrible thing. Compare that to this game where Hinako's story is very difficult. She has an abusive father. I say abusive. He is, you know, a loud, aggressive. He threw a knife at one point and it got lodged into the wall. So he is abusive, right? And her mother sits by and lets it happen. And that's like the most thing that she has to deal with. And now she's being forced into a life that she doesn't want. That's a great story and I loved learning about it. But that's not the same as Silent Hill 1, a person who was used to birth the god being held in a state of permanent agony and the whole town feeling that same agony because she can't die and yet she's horrifically in pain, or James killing his wife, or Heather coming to terms with that she isn't who she thought she was and that she's actually part of the cult that ruined the whole town. You know what I mean? Like it's so different. And while I like this story, just tonally, it feels toned down. And I think that's my biggest problem with this game is that if you take this as a standalone horror game, if it wasn't called Silent Hill, if it was called, I don't know, big scary Japanese horror game, I'd be like, this game is great and I loved it. But comparing it to what came before, it is a noticeable step down in horror, tone, atmosphere, and story. And that's why I think so many people are mixed on this game. So many people who love modern horror games like the modern Resident Evil crowd are probably loving this game because it is a little bit creepier than Resident Evil. But people who love the old games and have played the old games and want more of that, who wanted PT, and we never got that. And PT, by the way, is 100 times scarier than this game. Shit's all over this game in terms of scariness. And so do Silent Hill 1 to 4, if I'm being entirely honest. But people who wanted more of that are gonna be potentially disappointed. And as I said, considering it's been so long since we've gotten that, and this is the first thing that we have gotten, and it isn't that, I think it's absolutely valid that people are not happy with this game. I think it's absolutely valid for people to be disappointed. Even though the game is great, it's not what people expected. And I think that is something that studios and people on Twitter need to understand, that expectation is a big key part on people's enjoyment. If you say you're going to be given a burger and you're given a pizza, it doesn't matter if that pizza's great, you wanted a burger, right? And I think that people need to understand that it's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to dislike something. And if you love this game, great. I do too. But it's not a great Silent Hill game. I'm sorry. It's a great horror game, but it's not a great Silent Hill game. So that was just like a mini review. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be playing the game again to get the last couple of endings, but I'm going to be working on my things you might have missed video, because there are a lot of little things that you might miss, especially if you don't do New Game Plus. So I'm going to be working on that video. It's going to take me a few days, and I've got to be quick because Little Nightmares 3 is coming out in less than 2 weeks. So yeah, let me know. Have you played it? Do you love it? Are you going to buy it? Let me know down in the comments what you thought about Silent Hill F, and I'm sure a few of you will let me know how I'm wrong and my opinions don't matter. But yeah, let me know what you thought. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.